The last conversation of today will be a very, I hope, explanatory one, because we're super lucky to have with us here on stage Troels Abrahamsen. Troels will take us for a spin of his world, how he works. He works with decentralized technologies, trying to promote a better opportunity to create direct relationships with fans and audiences through new technologies. What's really lucky for all of us is that Troels not only has the ability, but also the skills and the mindsets that he can explain to us what is the next chapter of the internet and what is Web3 and NFTs and what's going on. What should we be excited about and what are we just on the verge of? And before I'll hand it over to you, Troels, because there's many new things with you and you have an entire new project that I'm very excited that we can all learn about. But before we can learn about it and before we can unfold it, can you help us all try to understand what is going on? We're moving from Web 2.0 till Web 3. What is it in layman's terms? What's going on? Because then we all have a foundation to be understanding and talking about your project.
Yes, I think that maybe Web 3 is harder to sort of figure out what it's all about because it's happening right now, but it's as it always is. It's easier to talk about things in hindsight. And Web 2 was, for me at least, how I understand it, was ideally this opening up of the web from a read-only experience to a read and write experience, where you all of a sudden had the opportunity to interact with and publish your own stuff in blogs or in guest books and whatever other method there was at the time. This is probably around the 2000s. And so the ideal was that now everyone could all of a sudden publish stuff to the internet. You didn't, and also engage with it in comment sections and all of these kind of new phenomenons where you could post stuff. So that turned into what we have now, or have been used to having. So a very heavily centralized platform economy, where essentially a few very large actors are mediating all of our experiences online.
And data and money.
And data and money. So everything sort of went from this diaspora of people trying stuff out and building their own blogs and using open source tools, using small platforms, and into these big silos and walled gardens that we have now, which is kind of the default position that both people who interact with the internet and also people who build on the internet have now, is that this is the way we do things. There are platforms and there are users. And what we have been seeing since, basically, I guess it's always been there, because it's an inherent part of the internet that you want decentralized access and you want open access. It's sort of what the internet is built on. That force has gained traction heavily during the last maybe 5 or 6 years, especially, and has now formed into something that is called Web3. That is I think of it mainly as a discussion right now about what are the values of the internet, how do we want the internet to, or the web to function, and what are the needed open infrastructures for that, for those sort of decentralized, the decentralized access and open world of possibilities for everyone. What are the necessary infrastructures to put that into place and to ensure that it doesn't get centralized around a few actors again?
Yeah, because you said to me last time we had a conversation, you said in the beginning of last year, I was almost depressed.
Yes, no.
I was so...
Not almost, I was very depressed.
You were very depressed
Yes.
about the situation. But you were also brave in the sense that you decided that I shouldn't just be depressed, I should do something about it. And to understand more of Web3 and the ideas and the discussion and the potential, can you elaborate to us, what did you start to do?
I think I started to engage with the communities that I could find that were sort of feeling the way I was. At the moment, it was mainly about concerns about music distribution and a very sort of heavily centralized model that is now that the only option you really have for releasing music online is to go directly to streaming. I know there is Bandcamp, there are other options, but the default position is you release directly to streaming. So that means that everyone, regardless of what your artistic product is, have to sort of be on the same playing field with the same rules, and it's not very. I mean, the streaming economy has not proven itself to be very, very sort of beneficial for different kinds of outputs, artistic outputs.
I think that's a kind way of saying it.
Yeah, it's a very lucrative thing for very few artists out there.
Yeah.
And it takes away a lot of the autonomy and decision making around what to do with your artistic products once you're ready to sort of put them to market or give them to an audience, and it takes away your possibilities of deciding how to package, price, and distribute your stuff. So I started engaging with communities that were experimenting with new ways. I had been into blockchains and decentralized things for some years, maybe 5 years or so, but it was mainly about decentralized finance and bitcoins and all that stuff, and it's not exactly my force. So I was sort of waiting for this moment of a cultural breakthrough in the blockchain space, and that came obviously with NFTs, and for me, it's as diverse a place to be as there are opinions about what it is. And I found out very quickly that, there was a pathway through all these communities to people that work with decentralized web in a myriad of ways that aren't necessarily translated into the media narrative, so the general narrative of what cryptocurrency, blockchains, and Web3 is all about.
So you started building something that we can look into. We have your site, and maybe if we bring Derive up, will you explain to us what is Derive and what is the core idea behind this new way of releasing your music?
Simon and I who started Derive together to sort of figure out if there were other ways to curate music and ways that maybe brought out some of the underlying protocol features of the blockchains and cryptocurrencies and smart contracts and all the other things that are in that space. So we came up with this idea of having a musical playlist of 7 tracks that was empty from the get-go, and then people would contributing artists would slowly fill up the playlist with music by passing a token to each other that would allow for the person holding it to add a piece of work to the chain. And so we started 4 chains, and they're slowly moving forward.
Yes.
And we also had to figure out a lot of stuff as we went along. And the project is in a very different place now than it was in the beginning, and we've sort of it helped us to figure out what are the infrastructural problems that need to be solved for music distribution in the NFT world or in a token setting.
So if just explain to me in the simplest manner possible.
I'll try.
If I was an artist and you
Yes.
invited me to
Yes.
one of these chains,
Yeah.
I put in one of my works on this chain.
Yes, and that would give you the complete autonomous decision ability to choose who's next in the chain.
Yes.
And we have implemented this sort of halfway technically there. The ambition is to fully implement it as something that is governed by code and not by us. So once we set the chain in motion, it won't be able to be stopped again. We can't control who you want to give the privilege of adding music to
It'll
the
have
chain.
its own life.
It'll have its own life, and the second participant can't have an influence on who the seventh or the sixth participant is. So you get this kind of decentralized linear curation model that might or might not work. It seems to resonate with some people. It's an offering of how you could do it, and how music could live in this space, and it's a way to sort of add another alternative to a already growing number of alternatives to releasing music on digital streaming services.
And a beautiful artistic curation, right? That it has its own life, that you don't decide over, and that gets to surprise you on the way too, with everybody that might end up there.
Yeah.
So just for the simplicity of it,
I'll
I've added upon this chain.
Yes.
What happens? Where can I sell it? Can I make?
So when you take over your part of the chain, we release 10 collector tokens.
Yeah.
And collector tokens are basically digital, physical, sort of digital releases. So it would be like a digital vinyl or something like that. And when people buy those, they get access to download the music on the specific chain that they bought their token for, and the money is transferred directly to you, the participant. So it's sort of a direct payment model, at least if you consider cryptocurrency to be payment.
Well, I think that depends upon who you are.
Yeah,
right?
I guess it does. So we try to make a system or a framework where the funding, the curation, the distribution is all encapsulated in each chain, and it's able to have its own life without being sort of dependent on other platforms. Basically, all this lives directly on the blockchain, and everyone could build their own interface on top of it if they wanted to, because that's sort of the other promise of Web3, is that you're building protocols, infrastructure, just as Koen was talking about a minute ago. It's basically protocols, and protocols only describe a way of doing things. They do not force people to interface in the way that the platforms do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so obviously there's so many things in what you're explaining. So is this the beginning of the end of the centralized web, where, like the stat that I brought on earlier on that said that in 2020, less than 8,000 artists made more than $100,000 out of Spotify? Mm-hmm. Is this the beginning of something that will set free parts of the web, of these new platforms, so that the artists themselves can become their own platform?
I think I don't want to give the impression that these are end-all solutions to problems that exist now, because they are far from mature enough to be that. But I think that they show a way of existing online that is an autonomous and less sort of client way of being existing online. So they sort of sort of force people to have self-custody of their own data, and they force builders at least to focus on what they provide into the space on the protocol level. What are the open structures and public goods that they provide? Sort of the movement tries to keep the focus on that part. And I think that's necessary to reiterate once in a while that that is also what the internet is about. It's not supposed to be a closed circuit. It's supposed to be an open circuit.
So for you as an artist and for Josephine that was here before, if we take this forth a couple of years, what could it change for the two of you and for thousands of others if the right building blocks comes into play, and this will, have a trajectory where the success leans towards all of us, and especially now speaking to musicians, can become more of their own platforms?
I think that it could provide a way to have a direct connection with your audience, and not have the mediated connection that we have now through Spotify. I don't know, or whatever it is. I don't know who I'm connecting with in my audience when I release stuff online. I just get these metrics back that are sort of, I don't know how valid they are, and I don't know what Spotify has done to them to sort of push it in the direction of their business strategy. So with open blockchains, with open public ledgers, you get a history of transactions, and you get to verify that people own your stuff, or that people have bought your stuff, or that they have supported you in the past, and vice versa. The audience gets to verify that I am in fact the author of the product that I have issued, and also they get to verify that they can take their stuff and move it around on the internet, which is also one of the main features of NFTs and collectibles and digital objects, is that they are, if done right, they are movable, and you can have them in various contexts online, and other people could build products that encapsulate them and bring them into the experience you have there.
So put in another way, when you turn 85, you can look back upon all of your digital tokens, your artwork, your music, your pieces, and you'll know exactly where they are, who owns them, and you can start a conversation with these people. You'll have a relationship. You're building the beginning of a closer and more intimate relationships with every one of us and of the audience and of your fans that wants to stay in closer contact with you.
Yes, that's the basic promise of blockchains, open blockchains and Web3. Yes, is that you get to keep and verify the connections you make, and that's something that's missing now online, because everything lives inside walled gardens, and when they close or go bankrupt or decide to sell or whatever, everything is moved. Interface, connections, everything moves or is destroyed, and that's I think that's something that we need to fix somehow, and I think that open protocols for digital stuff is the way to go.
Fantastic. We had a conversation before meeting here on stage, and you told me one example that is outside of this context, but that kinds of, I think, portrays in the most beautiful sense what this Web3, what is the foundation of. It was the DAO that bought the June manuscript.
Yes.
And maybe if you just bring it into the conversation and share it with the audience.
Yeah, there was recently a manuscript for an unfinished or unmade June picture. That is like a full manuscript and storyboard, and I think there are maybe 17 copies worldwide. with original drawings by H.R. Giger and Moebius and
Dali and
Dali and all these, like, really, it's a really fantastic, like, physical object. And it was put on auction at, I think, Christie's or some auction house. And in a matter of a week, a group of people from all over the world decided to pool together funds to bid on the manuscript at the auction, and they actually won the auction. So they ended up now having this manuscript in their custody as a group, and all of this is, of course, verifiable. So you know who's in the June DAO now, and they now need to sort of figure out what to do with that ownership, and that's a whole new. It's like a whole new type of organization that we see online, which is a borderless sort of union of people who are aligned in one common goal. Obviously, that could be either good or bad, but I consider it to be just as much as a force of good than it could be for evil. So organization is also something that I think we will see more of, like in these very sort of sudden bursts of organization around a topic. It's great for activism. It's great for all kinds of things where you want to bring together people from across the world and sort of align them to one goal. And I mean, bidding on auctions is like the least exciting example of what you could do, but that's basically because you could pool resources, but you don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be economical resources. It could be any type of resource. And we also see larger DAOs like Friends with Benefits or some of the other very big organizations that are actually building products that they need for their own things. Friends with Benefits built a ticketing system for on the blockchain, which is something that's been worked on for years, and then by individual startups, and now they just did it in a matter of a couple of months by pooling together resources inside the group, which is phenomenal. I think that's exciting.
So exciting. Yeah. And I wanted to use the example as kind of a segue to the broader perspective, because obviously you have such a rich knowledge within this field, and you understand it in far greater depth than many of us that doesn't work with it on a day-to-day basis. So if we are to look from now and into, well, maybe when your kids are semi-grown up, what do you wish that has taken on? What are some of these movements that you're hoping to see within this new iteration? And probably there'll be more by then, but this is the beginning of.
I don't necessarily know if the blockchains we're using today will be there in 10 or 20 or 50 years, but I hope that some of the principles, some of the ideas that you are a autonomous being in the world, and you have the right to your own data. You have the right to have custody over your own things, even though they are only digital things. And people who want to build products on top of that should ask for your permission instead of holding everything for you. I think that's some of the sort of the main principles about Web3 that I hope will live on into the future in whatever practical implementation they might arise in. But I hope that that's what we'll learn from this particular moment in internet history.
Fantastic. Okay, so to make it a little bit more practical towards the end of our conversation, where should we start? Like, where is a good spot to begin for our audience, where if you don't have experience with this, what should you do? What is an invitation from you to everybody watching?
Yeah, I think just as you got your email address in 1998 and you didn't know exactly what you were supposed to use it for until people started emailing each other all the time, I think you should set up a wallet, which means getting an address on a blockchain. And that could be there are a lot of different blockchains. I think Ethereum is the one to keep an eye on right now.
Yeah.
Because it's the largest programmable blockchain there is. And you can do that by downloading a wallet app. I recommend one called Rainbow Wallet.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get going. And you basically have it issues you an address on the Ethereum blockchain, and that's free, and that's just like planting your flag in the blockchain and saying now I'm here too.
Getting started.
Yeah.
Landing on not the moon, but the next chapter of the internet.
Yes, exactly.
Troels, thank you so much for sharing your
You're
work
welcome.
and your thought and your philosophy, helping all of us get less depressed in the new world.